In the complex world of global commodities, there are two French words that send shivers down the spines of central bankers and industrial CEOs. Force majeure. And just a few days ago, on the 4th of March 2026, the state-run energy giant QatarEnergy officially invoked them, following a wave of drone and missile strikes on its critical infrastructure at Ras Laffan. The company completely halted all production of liquefied natural gas or LNG. The mainstream media is calling this a temporary supply disruption that the market can easily absorb. They're wrong. This is a catastrophic contract collapse that instantly paralyzed roughly 20% of the entire global LNG market. And it has set off a chain reaction that is about to hit the European continent with a devastating wave of deindustrialization and inflation. So today, we are going to crack open the complex legal plumbing of the global natural gas market. We will explain exactly how force majeure works in international energy contracts. And we will reveal why this seemingly boring legal clause is actually a ticking time bomb for the European economy and the European Central Bank. My name is Nick, and you're watching Coin Bureau Finance. To put this economic shock into context, we first have to look at the illusion of European energy security. For the last 3 years, European politicians have been patting themselves on the back for successfully weaning their economies off of Russian pipeline gas. In 2021, Russia accounted for roughly 40% of the European Union's pipeline gas imports. But following the invasion of Ukraine in 2022 and the subsequent destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines, Europe was forced into a frantic pivot. They replaced those cheap, reliable pipelines with massive shipments of seaborne LNG. By 2025, Russian pipeline gas had dropped to just 6% of the EU's mix, while LNG imports surged to record highs. The United States became the dominant supplier, providing roughly 60% of those LNG imports, while Qatar stepped in as a critical pillar for the rest. The political narrative was that Europe had successfully diversified its energy grid and secured its industrial future. But the structural reality was that Europe simply traded one massive geopolitical dependency for another. Instead of relying on pipeline from the east, they were now entirely dependent on specialized tanker ships navigating some of the most dangerous maritime choke points on Earth. And the moment those ships stopped moving, the entire European energy strategy began to unravel. On the 2nd of March 2026, the physical reality of this vulnerability was exposed when Iranian drones struck QatarEnergy's facilities. Meanwhile, the escalating conflict effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, the vital waterway through which Qatar exports 90% of its LNG. Over 150 vessels, including massive LNG carriers, were forced to drop anchor and wait. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking that Europe has spent the last few years building up massive strategic gas reserves just in case something like this happened. The mainstream media narrative being pushed right now is that European reserves are full and the continent will be absolutely fine. But there's a catch. That narrative is a complete myth based on outdated seasonal data. As of early March 2026, European Union gas storage stands at just 30% of capacity, and that is the lowest level since the 2022 energy crisis, and it sits a full 30% below the 5-year seasonal average. In critical industrial hubs like Germany, storage is hovering around 30%, while the Netherlands has plummeted to an abysmal 10%. Europe is entering the crucial spring and summer injection season with dangerously depleted buffers. Storage is meant to be an insurance policy for short-term cold snaps, not a replacement for the continuous daily flow of contracted LNG imports that keep heavy industry running. And those contracted flows have just been legally severed, which brings us to the actual mechanics of force majeure and why it is so devastating to the global energy market. In plain English, force majeure translates from French as superior force. It's a specific legal concept embedded in international sale and purchase agreements that protects parties from liability when unforeseeable or extraordinary events prevent them from fulfilling a contract. It is not a simple shipping delay or a request to reschedule. When QatarEnergy invoked force majeure, they were legally voiding their immediate contractual obligations to deliver millions of tons of gas to their buyers. And to understand why this is a financial powder keg, you have to understand the difference between long-term LNG contracts and the spot market. Think of a long-term LNG contract like having a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage on your home. European energy companies sign deals with Qatar to buy gas at a price that is typically pegged to roughly 11 to 13% of the price of Brent crude oil. With oil hovering around $75 per barrel, that means these companies have locked in their natural gas at a predictable rate of roughly $7 to $10 per million British thermal units. And this fixed rate is the bedrock of industrial planning. It allows chemical plants, steel mills, and fertilizer manufacturers to forecast their costs years in advance and operate profitably. But when a supplier declares force majeure, that fixed-rate contract is effectively suspended. The buyer, who thought they had guaranteed cheap energy, is suddenly thrown out into the cold and forced to buy replacement gas on what is known as the spot market. And the spot market is exactly like having an adjustable rate mortgage during the middle of a banking crisis. There is no price ceiling, there is no protection, and you are bidding against every other desperate buyer on the planet. When QatarEnergy took 20% of the global supply offline, Asian buyers who rely heavily on Qatari gas panicked. They immediately flooded the spot market looking for replacement cargoes, and the Asian benchmark price, known as the JKM, exploded. In just 5 days, the price of Asian spot LNG surged from $10.75 to an astonishing $25.39 per million British thermal units. And that's a 137% price spike in less than a week. And because the global LNG market is interconnected, European buyers are now forced to bid against these energy-hungry Asian markets to secure whatever American or West African cargoes are available. We are already seeing the physical evidence of this bidding war playing out on the oceans. Vessel tracking data from early March showed multiple LNG tankers from the United States and Nigeria pulling massive U-turns in the Atlantic. They literally diverted their courses away from Europe and headed towards Asia via the Cape of Good Hope because Asian buyers were willing to pay massive premiums. And this intense competition has sent the European gas benchmark, the TTF, surging by over 70% to more than 60 euros per megawatt hour. And the logistical chaos of avoiding the Middle East has caused LNG tanker charter rates to double to an astronomical $200,000 per day. Even the maritime insurance markets are collapsing, with leading insurers entirely cancelling war risk cover for vessels operating in the region. When global supply chains fracture like this, the economic fallout hits your wallet through inflation faster than you can ever possibly prepare. And speaking of preparing, if you want to face macroeconomic pressures like this and come out in one piece, then being well-informed is an absolute must. And that's why every week we publish a free newsletter that breaks down the complex geopolitical and financial data that the mainstream media completely ignores. We give you the actionable insight you need to understand how these macro forces and shocks will actually impact your portfolio and your purchasing power. And you can sign up to the newsletter right now by hitting the link in the description or by scanning this QR code on your screen. It's completely free, and it's the best way to stay ahead of the curve in a market that is pricing in total chaos. Okay, back to the video. When spot market natural gas prices double in a matter of days, it doesn't just mean that your winter heating bill is going to go up. It means the immediate structural deindustrialization of the European continent. And to see exactly how this contagion spreads, we just have to look at Germany. Germany has some of the highest industrial energy prices in the world, paying nearly triple what the United States pays for industrial electricity. The German economy is already struggling right now, having registered negative annual GDP growth for 2 consecutive years in 2023 and 2024. Now, you might have seen the recent headlines celebrating the fact that the German Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, or the PMI, finally ticked up to 50.9 in February of 2026. Pundits are calling this a glorious return to expansion territory after 42 months of contraction. But the truth is that this recovery is a complete mirage. It is entirely driven by government infrastructure stimulus and a massive jump in defense spending, not by organic industrial competitiveness. It's a band-aid placed over a gaping structural wound, and this new LNG price shock is going to rip it right off. Look at BASF, the world's largest chemical company. Their flagship facility in Ludwigshafen is the beating heart of German heavy industry, and natural gas is its lifeblood. Because of the structurally higher energy costs that began in 2022, BASF has already been forced to eliminate roughly 4,800 jobs. They have already permanently closed plants producing critical chemicals. The entire German chemical sector is currently struggling to survive, operating at an average capacity utilization rate of just 70%. And when you are a chemical plant, you cannot simply absorb a 70% spike in your primary input cost. You either pass that cost onto every single manufacturing sector that buys your chemicals, or you shut the factory down entirely. And the exact same bloodbath is happening in the European steel sector. ThyssenKrupp, Germany's largest steel company, recently announced plans to cut 11,000 jobs, which is a staggering 40% of their entire steel division workforce. They have already temporarily closed 2 electric steel plants in Germany and France, and they are projecting an €800 million net loss for the financial year. Steel production requires enormous amounts of natural gas for heating, and when spot prices explode, producing European steel becomes mathematically impossible. But the most terrifying contagion mechanism of all is the European fertilizer industry. Natural gas is not just used to power the machines that make the fertilizer, it's the chemical feedstock used to synthesize ammonia. Natural gas accounts for between 70 and 80% of total production costs for nitrogen fertilizers. During the last major gas spike, roughly 70% of the entire European ammonia industry was temporarily forced to shut down because it was too expensive to operate. And we're already seeing European facilities ceasing production again in early 2026 due to these elevated hub prices. And the economic logic here is brutally simple. Higher spot gas prices lead to fertilizer plant shutdowns, which lead to massive spikes in agricultural input costs, which lead directly to explosive food price inflation at the grocery store. The energy shock is systematically destroying the margins of every business that actually makes physical things. And it is accelerating the rise of what economists call zombie companies. In 2025, the number of insolvent companies in Germany reached its highest level in more than 10 years, with over 24,300 cases. Corporate insolvencies in the manufacturing sector specifically shot up by more than 10%, putting hundreds of thousands of jobs at risk. According to a recent study commissioned by the Federation of German Industries, 1/5 of Germany's total industrial output could permanently disappear by 2030 due to these uncompetitive energy costs. They are watching the permanent deindustrialization of their continent in real time. And this brings us to the big question. How on earth is the European Central Bank going to handle a massive structural energy shock when their entire policy framework assumes that energy prices are going to go down? At its most recent meetings in early 2026, the ECB held its main refinancing rate steady at 2.15%. They explicitly stated that their models expected inflation to stabilize at their 2% target. But if you read the fine print of the ECB's macroeconomic projections, their entire baseline scenario relies on energy inflation being negative through 2026 and 2027. They literally built their economic models on the assumption that natural gas and oil would keep getting cheaper. The QatarEnergy force majeure just took that assumption, tore it into pieces, and set it on fire. According to peer-reviewed economic models, a gas supply shock that increases prices by just 10% raises euro area headline inflation by 0.6 percentage points after 1 year. With European gas prices currently up over 70% in a matter of days, the mathematical pass-through to core inflation is going to be devastating. And this puts the ECB in an impossible, inescapable corner. If energy prices spike and drive inflation back up to 3 or 4%, the ECB will be forced to hold interest rates high or even hike them further. But if they hold rates high, they will completely crush the already fragile industrial sector, accelerating the wave of zombie company bankruptcies and triggering a deep recession. On the other hand, if the ECB panics and cuts interest rates to try and save the manufacturing sector, they risk letting inflation expectations become completely unanchored. And this would destroy the purchasing power of the euro, which is already breaking down. Just this week, the euro to dollar exchange rate dropped 1.39%, falling over 3.5% from its January high. And because Europe imports its liquefied natural gas priced in US dollars, a weaker euro means that every single shipment of replacement gas just became even more expensive. It's a perfect self-fulfilling doom loop. Goldman Sachs recently warned that if the disruption in the Strait of Hormuz lasts for just 1 month, European natural gas prices could approach 74 euros per megawatt hour. If it lasts for 2 months, prices could easily break above 100 euros per megawatt hour, triggering massive permanent demand destruction. The transition from cheap pipeline energy to seaborne LNG was always a highly fragile gamble. By invoking force majeure, QatarEnergy has shattered the illusion of European energy security once and for all. The continent is now entirely exposed to the brutal, unforgiving realities of the global spot market. They are bidding for survival against Asian economic giants, and the resulting wave of inflation will force the European Central Bank to choose between saving the currency or saving the industrial base. There are no easy solutions left, only incredibly painful trade-offs. But what do you think? Do you believe Europe's industrial base can adapt and survive this historic energy shock? Or are we watching the permanent, irreversible deindustrialization of the continent? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you want to understand how the growing global debt load is threatening to crash the US economy next, you should check out our video on that right over here. That's all from me today. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.